the griffin!
The valley had not seen silence like this in 50 years. Two armies stood across from each other beneath a sky bleached pale by early autumn wind. On the southern ridge, human banners snapped sharply, blue and silver crests catching the light. On the northern rise, orc standards of black iron and crimson cloth moved less in the wind and more like something breathing. Between them stretched a field of yellowing grass. Unclaimed, uncrossed, unforgiving. Cashin Vale rode into that field alone. No armor, no escort, no drawn weapon. Only a white banner tied to a simple ash spear and a sealed letter bearing the king's mark at his side. Behind him, the human line shifted uneasily. Soldiers watched with tight jaws and ready bows, every movement in the distance analyzed for betrayal. Many believed this was theater, that the Orc Twins had already chosen war, and this invitation to parley was merely a final humiliation before bloodshed. Cashin did not share that certainty. He rode steadily, each hoofbeat carrying him farther from safety and deeper into uncertainty. He had seen war before. He had studied orc strategy. He understood what made the twins dangerous was not their brutality. It was their discipline. At the midpoint of the valley, a line of orc warriors stepped forward from the northern ridge. Massive, silent. They did not raise weapons. They did not shout. They simply waited. Cashin stopped his horse 10 paces from them and dismounted slowly. He planted the ash spear upright in the ground and stepped back from it, palms open to show he carried no blade in hand. An orc captain approached, armor layered in dark steel plates etched with clan markings. A scar ran from his brow to his jaw. "You are Cashin Vale," the captain said. "Yes. You come alone. Yes. You understand where you stand." Cashin glanced briefly across the valley toward his own army, then back toward the looming figures before him. "Yes." The captain studied him for a long moment. "If you attempt deception," he said quietly, "you will not die quickly." "I don't intend to attempt anything," Cashin replied. The captain's gaze flickered, not quite approval. "Follow," he ordered. The escort did not blindfold him. They did not bind him. That alone told Cashin this was not performance. They climbed the northern ridge together, passing through ranks of orc warriors who watched him with open hostility but controlled restraint. No insults were thrown. No threats spoken aloud. That unsettled him more than shouting would have. At the top of the ridge stood the citadel of Karveth, a fortress carved directly into black stone cliffs. Twin towers rose from its heart, symmetrical yet distinct. One tower bore jagged battlements like broken teeth. The other was smoother, carved with deliberate angles and strategic lines. Strength and precision. The doors of the citadel opened as they approached. Inside, the air felt cooler. Torches burned blue against stone walls. Banners hung from the ceiling, each marked with different clan insignia, dozens united under one command. The twins' command. Cashin was led into a circular chamber open to the sky above. At its center burned a low ceremonial fire contained within a ring of carved obsidian. And there they stood. Kalar, Maevra, the Orc Twins. Kalar stood to the right of the fire, taller, broader, his armor heavier and scarred from countless battles. His presence radiated physical dominance. His eyes were sharp and unyielding. Maevra stood opposite him, equally tall but leaner, her armor lighter and adorned with etched runes rather than dense. Her gaze did not measure Cashin's body. It measured his mind. They did not greet him. They did not bow. Kalar spoke first. "You stand in our citadel," he said, voice low and steady. "Your army waits below." "Yes." Maevra stepped closer to the fire. "You requested parley," she said. "We granted audience." Cashin inclined his head. "I come to prevent war." A faint, humorless sound left Kalar's throat. "War does not require your permission," he said. "No," Cashin agreed. "But it requires choice." Silence followed. The twins exchanged a glance, not of agreement, but of shared understanding. Kalar stepped forward. "You speak of prevention," he said. "But your border forts expand each season." Maevra circled slightly, never taking her eyes off Cashin. "Your king fortifies while requesting peace," she added. "That is contradiction." Cashin met their gaze steadily. That is fear, he replied. The fire between them flickered. Kaler's expression hardened. You presume to name our cause? No, Cashin said evenly. I name ours. Silence settled again, heavier now. Maevra studied him carefully. You understand the consequence of failure here, she said. Yes. Fail us, Kaler added, and your army below will not leave this valley. Cashin did not swallow. I understand. Maevra stepped fully into the firelight. Then hear this, she said. You will face 3 tests. Kaler's voice followed hers like thunder behind lightning. Strength, truth, choice. Maevra's eyes did not blink. Fail any one of them, she said quietly, and war begins at sunrise. The fire crackled between them. Below, 2 armies waited. Above, the sky remained wide and indifferent. Cashin Vale stood before the Orc Twins knowing that survival was not enough. He had to pass, because failing meant more than his death. It meant the valley would burn. The chamber remained silent after the decree. 3 tests. Strength, truth, choice. Fail one, and an entire valley would drown in blood. Cashin did not look toward the open sky above the citadel. He did not imagine the human soldiers below adjusting their armor in restless anticipation. He kept his focus on the 2 figures standing across the fire. Kaler broke the silence first. You will not be granted time to prepare, he said. These tests are not academic exercises. They are judgment, Maevra added. Cashin inclined his head slightly. Then I will answer in kind. Kaler's eyes narrowed faintly. You speak calmly for a man whose failure means war. If I spoke with panic, Cashin replied, would it inspire confidence? Maevra's gaze flickered, faint interest. Kaler turned away first, pacing slowly along the circular chamber. His boots struck stone with deliberate weight. You believe this is about diplomacy, he said without looking back. You believe words can prevent what has been building for years. I believe discipline can, Cashin answered. That stopped him. Kaler turned slowly. Discipline? Yes. Maevra stepped closer to the fire, watching both men carefully. Explain, she said. War is easier, Cashin replied. Retaliation requires no restraint. It feels decisive. But peace requires control. It requires resisting what pride demands. Kaler's jaw tightened. You accuse us of pride? I accuse both our peoples, Cashin said evenly. The fire crackled between them again. Maevra circled Cashin slowly now, studying his posture, the steadiness of his breathing, the lack of visible tremor in his hands. You are not a soldier, she observed. No. Not a king. No. Then why were you sent? Cashin met her eyes. Because I am the only one who advised against reinforcing the 3rd border fort. That earned Kaler's attention. You opposed expansion? He asked. Yes. And were ignored? Yes. Kaler gave a short, sharp exhale. Your king fortifies while sending you here. Yes. Maevra's gaze sharpened. So you stand before us representing a crown that does not fully trust peace. Yes. There was no hesitation in his voice. That honesty hung heavy in the chamber. Kaler studied him more closely now. Why tell us that, he asked. Because you would discover it regardless, Cashin replied. And if I withhold it, I fail your 2nd test before it begins. Maevra's lips curved faintly, not a smile, but recognition. You anticipate, she said quietly. I try. Kaler walked back toward the fire, stopping opposite his sister. You believe transparency will save you. No, Cashin answered. But deception guarantees failure. The twins exchanged another glance. It was subtle, but not harmonious. Kaler's posture leaned toward inevitability. Maevra's toward evaluation. You understand, Kaler said, that we do not always agree. I suspected, Cashin replied. Maevra's voice cut in calmly. My brother believes strength alone prevents invasion. Kaler did not deny it. And you? Cashin asked carefully. I believe strength must be understood before it is respected, she said. Cashin absorbed that. 2 rulers. One leaning toward decisive force. The other toward strategic dominance. Neither foolish. Neither soft. But not identical. You are not unified, Cashin said quietly. Kaler's gaze snapped toward him. Be careful. Cashin did not step back. Your strength lies in difference, he said. If you agreed on everything, your enemies would predict you. Silence. Then, a faint, unexpected sound. Kaler laughed. Not warmly, but genuinely. You observe well for a human, he said. Maevra's eyes remained locked on Cashin. Observation is not survival, she said. The first test begins at dusk. What is required? Cashin asked. Kaler stepped forward. You will enter the Circle of Iron. Cashin did not recognize the name, but he did not ask. You will face one of our champions, Kaler continued. You may defend yourself. You may not kill, Maevra added. Cashin's eyes flickered briefly. And if I am killed? Then you fail, Kaler said simply. And war begins, Maevra finished. The fire flared slightly as wind passed overhead. Cashin inclined his head. I understand. Kaler studied him carefully. You fear death? Yes, Cashin answered honestly. That answer seemed to satisfy him more than bravado would have. Maevra stepped closer, stopping only a pace away. If you strike with intent to kill, she said quietly, you fail. If you refuse to fight, Kaler added, you fail. Cashin nodded slowly. Strength, he murmured. Without savagery, Maevra corrected. The chamber doors opened behind him. Guards entered silently. Prepare him, Kaler ordered. As Cashin was led from the chamber, he felt the weight of the citadel settle around him. The twins did not agree on everything, but they agreed on one thing completely. If he failed, the valley would burn before sunrise. And dusk was coming quickly. Dusk painted the sky in iron and ember. The Circle of Iron lay at the heart of the citadel's outer courtyard, a ring of dark metal set into the stone floor, wide enough for combat, yet small enough to prevent retreat. Torches flared high along the surrounding walls, casting long shadows that turned every watching figure into something larger than life. Orc warriors filled the tiers above the circle, silent, observing, waiting. Cashin stood at the edge of the ring, stripped of his formal cloak. He wore simple leather, envoy attire, not armor. A wooden practice blade had been placed in his hand. It was weighted properly, balanced well, not ceremonial, real enough to injure. Across the circle stood his opponent, an orc champion nearly a head taller than the rest, broad as a gate, skin marked with ritual scars across his arms. His name was announced by a captain in a voice that echoed off stone walls. Varkle of the Ashen Fong. The crowd rumbled low at the name. Varkle stepped into the circle without hesitation. He carried a blunted iron blade, not sharpened to kill, but heavy enough to break bone. Cashin stepped inside as well. The ring seemed smaller once he crossed its boundary. Kaler and Maevra stood above them on a stone balcony overlooking the circle. Kaler's voice carried clearly. This test measures strength. Maevra's followed. It measures restraint. Varkle rolled his shoulders once, eyes fixed on Cashin. You are thin, he said flatly. I am aware, Cashin replied. A faint ripple of amusement moved through the upper tiers. A horn sounded. Varkle moved first. Not with reckless charge, with terrifying precision. His blade cut downward in a strike, meant to test reflex, not kill. Cashin barely deflected in time, the force of impact sending shock through his arms. He stepped back instinctively. The ring limited his retreat. Varkle pressed forward, blows coming heavier now. Each strike forced Cashin to defend rather than counter. The orc was testing his endurance, his composure. Cashin focused on breath. He had trained in court dueling halls, not to dominate, but to survive. Orc combat was different. It was grounded, direct, efficient. Varkle feinted left. Cashin shifted right. The real strike came low. It clipped his thigh. Pain flared sharply. The crowd murmured. Cashin did not retaliate. He adjusted stance. Waited. Varkle circled slowly now. You strike back, the champion growled. Or you fall. Cashin lunged forward unexpectedly, not with killing intent. He struck Varkle's forearm, forcing the iron blade aside, then stepped inside the larger orc's reach and drove his wooden blade against Varkle's chest. A clean hit. Not fatal, but clear. The crowd reacted louder this time. Varkle grinned, sharp teeth flashing. Good, he said. Then he came harder. The next exchange was brutal. Iron struck wood with thunderous force. Cashin's shoulder rang from impact. He slipped once, barely avoiding a blow that would have crushed his collarbone. He saw an opening. Varkle's balance shifted too far forward. Cashin pivoted. He could strike the throat, the temple, the exposed gap beneath the rib. One precise thrust could end it. Warriors in the tiers leaned forward. Kaler's gaze sharpened. Maevra did not blink. Cashin's blade hovered inches from Varkle's throat. Time slowed. Varkle's eyes met his. Not afraid. expectant, waiting to see who Cashin truly was. Cashin lowered the blade. Instead, he shifted his weight and struck Varkel's wrist, disarming him cleanly. The iron blade clattered against the stone floor outside the circle. Cashin stepped back immediately, lowering his weapon completely. He did not press advantage. He did not strike again. Silence fell. Varkel looked down at his empty hand, then back at Cashin. "You had me," the champion said quietly. "Yes," Cashin replied. "You did not take it." "No." Varkel studied him for a long breath. Then he stepped backward and dropped to one knee. The crowd reacted sharply, shock rippling through the tears. Kaler's jaw tightened. Maevra's eyes flickered with unmistakable approval. Varkel rose slowly. "He fights with control," the champion declared. "Not fear." He turned toward the balcony. "He passes strength." The courtyard erupted in mixed reaction, some approving, some unsettled. Kaler spoke down from above. "You spared an enemy who would not have spared you." Cashin met his gaze. "I spared a test," he said. Maevra's voice carried softly but clearly. "Strength without slaughter," she said. The torches flared as wind swept through the courtyard. Cashin's leg throbbed where the blade had clipped him. His arms trembled from impact. He felt very mortal standing inside that iron ring. Kaler studied him long and hard. "One test passed," he said at last. Maevra's eyes did not leave Cashin. Two remain. Above them, the sky darkened fully. Below the ridge, two armies still waited. And sunrise crept closer with every passing hour. Night settled fully over Karveth. The circle of iron lay dark now, its torches extinguished after the duel. Cashin's leg had been bound by an orc healer, efficiently, without ceremony. The wound was not crippling, but it reminded him with every step that the first test had been no performance. He had survived. He had restrained. But survival would not carry him through what came next. He was led once more into the circular chamber open to the sky. The fire at its center burned lower now, coals glowing red rather than blazing high. The air felt colder. Kaler and Maevra stood on opposite sides of the flame. No audience filled the walls this time. No warriors watched. This was not spectacle. This was exposure. Maevra spoke first. "The second test is truth." Kaler's voice followed. Under oath. A stone basin was placed before Cashin. Within it, coals burned faintly blue, the same hue as the torches lining the citadel. "Place your hand above the coals," Maevra instructed. Cashin did. Heat licked at his skin, sharp but not unbearable. "Speak falsehood," Kaler said, "and the flame will mark you." Cashin did not ask how. He suspected the answer would not comfort him. Maevra stepped closer. "You will answer without evasion," she said. "Without diplomacy. Without careful phrasing." Cashin nodded once. Kaler began. "Does your king intend to expand the border forts within the year?" "Yes." The coals flickered but did not flare. Maevra's gaze remained steady. "Are additional troops already being trained for northern deployment?" "Yes." The heat intensified slightly. Kaler's jaw hardened. "Is the expansion defensive?" Cashin hesitated. The coals flared faintly. "Partly," he said. The heat rose sharply, licking closer to his palm. Maevra's eyes narrowed. "Clarify." Cashin inhaled slowly. "It is defensive against perceived threat," he said carefully. "But the king also believes controlling the valley would secure trade routes." The coals steadied. "Truth." Kaler stepped closer to the fire. "Does your king trust this negotiation?" "No." A ripple of tension passed through the chamber. "Does he expect war?" Maevra asked. "Yes." "Then why are you here?" Kaler demanded. "Because expectation is not inevitability." The coals burned evenly. Maevra circled him slowly. "If your king commands attack at dawn," she asked, "will your army obey?" "Yes." The heat did not waver. "And you?" she pressed. Cashin's throat tightened. "Yes." The coals flared brighter, but did not burn. Kaler's voice dropped lower. "You would fight us?" "Yes." "Even after this?" "Yes." The heat rose again, not as punishment, as acknowledgement. Maevra stopped directly before him. "Why?" Cashin met her eyes steadily. "Because I serve my kingdom," he said. "Not my preference." The coals dimmed slightly. Kaler studied him in silence. "Then why seek peace if you would still fight?" Cashin's hand trembled slightly above the heat now, not from flame, but from weight. "Because I would rather fail in preventing war," he said quietly, "than succeed in waging it." The fire steadied completely. Silence followed. Maevra's gaze sharpened further. Is there dissent within your ranks? Yes. Do some commanders prefer war? Yes. Do you know of any plans beyond this negotiation? Cashin's breath slowed. Yes. The coals flared. Kaler's eyes darkened. Speak. Cashin did not withdraw his hand. There is a faction among the border captains, he said. They believe negotiation is delay. They have positioned scouts deeper than authorized. The heat intensified. Authorized by whom? Maevra demanded. By the king. And you knew this before riding here? Yes. The coals surged brighter, close now, painfully hot. Why did you not disclose this sooner? Kaler's voice carried edge. Because I hoped it would not matter, Cashin admitted. The flame flared sharply, brushing his skin. He did not pull away. Maevra's voice cut in. Does this faction intend to attack regardless of outcome? Cashin closed his eyes briefly. Yes. The coals erupted in sudden light. Pain lanced across his palm. He clenched his jaw, but did not withdraw. Silence followed, thick and heavy. The fire gradually settled back into a low burn. Maevra stepped back. He speaks truth. Kaler's gaze remained fixed on Cashin's trembling hand. You come asking peace, he said slowly, while some among yours prepare betrayal. Yes. And you still stand here. Yes. Kaler's eyes narrowed. Why reveal this? Cashin lowered his hand slowly from above the coals. The skin was reddened, blistered faintly. Because if you discover it after I leave, he said quietly, peace dies with trust. The chamber fell silent. Maevra watched him carefully. You expose weakness in your own ranks, she said. Yes. Kaler exhaled through his nose. Truth cuts deeper than steel, he murmured. Maevra nodded once. The second test is passed. Cashin's hand throbbed. 2 tests complete. 1 remained. And the final one, he suspected, would not burn his skin, but something far more dangerous. The fire in the chamber burned lower now. Only embers remained, casting long, uneven shadows across the stone walls. Cashin's palm had been wrapped in dark cloth, the faint scent of herbal salve rising from it. The sting remained constant, a reminder that truth had weight. Kaler and Maevra stood opposite one another again, but this time there was no immediate command. Silence stretched. Cashin understood instinctively that the final test would not involve steel or flame. It would involve consequence. Maevra stepped forward first. The third test is not of strength, she said quietly. Nor of honesty, Kaler added. It is of choice, Maevra finished. A guard entered carrying a sealed scroll bound in blue thread. Cashin's stomach tightened. He recognized the insignia. Order command. The guard handed it to Maevra, who did not break the seal herself. Instead, she extended it toward Cashin. This was intercepted at dusk, she said. Cashin took it carefully with his uninjured hand and broke the seal. His eyes moved quickly across the script, then stopped, and did not move again. The silence deepened. What does it say? Kaler demanded. Cashin swallowed once. It is from Captain Redhan, he said. Speak plainly, Maevra instructed. Cashin lifted his gaze slowly. The faction I mentioned has moved ahead of schedule. Kaler's posture stiffened. They intend to strike? Yes. When? Kaler's voice was iron. Before dawn. The words landed like a blade. The valley below still held 2 armies waiting under truce. Maevra's eyes sharpened dangerously. Your people prepare betrayal under a banner of negotiation. Yes. And you knew they might. Yes. Kaler stepped closer, fury controlled but undeniable. Then this test is simple. He gestured toward the open sky above. You return to your army and allow events to unfold. Maevra continued seamlessly. Or you expose the ambush now. Cashin's chest felt tight. If I expose it, he said slowly, my own commanders will call it treason. Yes, Kaler said flatly. If I remain silent, Cashin continued, you will view it as confirmation of deceit. Yes, Maevra said. Kaler's gaze did not waver. You asked to prevent war. Maevra's voice dropped softer. Now you decide whether your loyalty lies with strategy or peace. Cashin's mind raced. If he warned the twins, he would undermine his own military faction publicly. His credibility in court could shatter. He could be branded traitor. If he stayed silent, the rogue attack would begin at dawn, and even if the twins repelled it, the truce would collapse into full-scale war. Choice, not between life and death, between allegiance and consequence. Kaler folded his arms. Speak. Cashin exhaled slowly. The attack will begin from the eastern ravine, he said. The chambers seemed to tighten around the admission. Signal fires disguised as misfires will precede it. Maevra did not blink. How many? 200 light infantry. Archers behind. Kaler's jaw hardened. You betray your own commanders. I prevent a massacre, Cashin replied. Your king did not authorize this strike, Maevra asked carefully. No. And you choose to expose it rather than protect your kingdom's tactical advantage. Yes. Silence settled heavily. Kaler stepped closer until he stood only a pace away. If your king condemns you, he said, what then? Cashin held his ground. Then I face it. Maevra studied him for a long moment. You understand, she said quietly. If we repel this ambush, your army may not believe it was rogue. I know. They may believe we fabricated it. I know. You may be executed. Yes. The admission did not waver. Kaler's expression shifted, not softened, but measured. You choose to weaken your position. No. Cashin replied calmly. I choose to strengthen trust. The chamber fell still. Outside, wind brushed faintly across the open sky. Maevra exchanged a look with her brother. For once, they did not appear divided. Kaler turned sharply toward the guards. Send runners to the eastern ravine, he ordered. Prepare counterposition, no charge. No escalation beyond defense. The guards moved immediately. Maevra stepped back toward the dying embers of the fire. The third test, she said quietly, is past. Cashin did not feel triumph. Only gravity. Below the ridge, his own people prepared to strike. Above, the Orc Twins now prepared to intercept without igniting full war. Kaler looked at him long and hard. You chose peace at cost to yourself, he said. Yes. Maevra's eyes remained steady. Dawn will determine whether your choice holds. The embers flickered faintly. 3 tests. Strength. Truth. Choice. Cashin stood in the quiet aftermath knowing that the final trial was no longer symbolic. It would unfold in the valley before sunrise. And if even one side misstepped, war would begin anyway. The citadel did not sleep. Runners moved like shadows through its corridors, carrying Kaler's orders to captains stationed along the northern ridge. Torches were hooded. Armor was adjusted quietly. No war drums sounded. This would not be a charge. It would be containment. Cashin stood at the balcony overlooking the valley, the night wind cold against his face. Below, faint lights flickered in the human encampment. From this height, it looked calm. Too calm. They will move within the hour, Maevra said, stepping beside him. Yes. You did not hesitate long. Cashin exhaled slowly. Hesitation would not change what must be done. Kaler approached from the opposite side of the balcony, heavy boots striking stone. My captains are in position, he said. We will intercept at the ravine and prevent escalation. Without counterattack? Maevra asked, though she already knew the answer. Kaler's jaw tightened. Without counterattack. The word cost him something. Cashin watched the exchange carefully. You disagree, he said quietly. Kaler did not deny it. An ambush is declaration, he said. Tradition demands response. And discipline demands restraint. Maevra replied evenly. The tension between them sharpened. Cashin understood something now. The tests had not been solely for him. They were also for the twins. Kaler represented the instinct of retaliation. Maevra embodied the calculation of control. Peace required both. If this rogue faction succeeds in landing the first blow, Kaler said, my warriors will demand blood. And if we crush them without widening the field, Maevra countered, we demonstrate strength without surrendering negotiation. Kaler's gaze shifted to Cashin. You place us in a precarious position, envoy. I know. If we restrain ourselves and your king denies involvement, we appear manipulated. I know. And if your king claims this was sanctioned? Cashin's expression did not falter. Then you will know I told the truth. Silence fell between them. Below, a faint spark flared briefly in the eastern darkness. Cashin saw it first. There, he said. A second spark ignited moments later. Signal fires. Kaler's posture stiffened. So it begins. Far below, human soldiers moved silently from the ravine's shadow, unaware that Orc sentries had already shifted into position. No war horns sounded. No battle cry split the air. Instead, the first human arrow flew into darkness and struck only empty rock. Orc shields rose in unison from concealed positions along the ravine walls. Torches flared suddenly, illuminating human troops caught mid-advance. Confusion rippled through their ranks. "Hold!" Kaler barked to his captains below. No arrows returned fire. No charge answered aggression. Orc warriors blocked the narrow pass, shields interlocked, refusing to advance beyond the ravine's threshold. The rogue captain, Red Han, shouted orders desperately from the human line. "Push forward." But his men hesitated. They had expected surprise. They had found preparation. Maevra watched carefully. "They are unsure," she murmured. Cashin leaned forward slightly. "If you strike now, they will claim ambush," he said. Kaler's hands tightened on the stone railing. Every instinct in him demanded retaliation, to crush the incursion, to send a message written in broken bodies. Instead, he raised his arm. "Stand," he commanded through signal flags. The Orc line held. Human arrows flew again, glancing harmlessly off reinforced shields. A few Orc warriors staggered but did not fall. Then, something unexpected happened. Human soldiers at the rear began lowering their bows. Confusion spread backward through the line. Rethan's voice grew strained. "This was not the plan," someone shouted. From the human camp's main body, horns sounded suddenly, not attack, but recall. Cashin's breath caught. "They've realized," he said. Maevra's eyes sharpened. "Your king's loyalists intervened." Kaler exhaled slowly. The rogue faction's advance faltered completely. Red Han attempted one final push, but without full support, his men began retreating under shouted orders from their own commanders. Within minutes, the ravine quieted. No charge, no massacre, only scattered arrows embedded uselessly in stone. Kaler lowered his arm slowly. "They withdraw," he said. Maevra studied the valley carefully. "No pursuit." Kaler hesitated for only a heartbeat, then nodded. "No pursuit." The Orc shields parted just enough to allow the human soldiers' safe retreat back across the valley. Cashin closed his eyes briefly. It had held. Barely. Kaler turned toward him. "You told the truth," he said. "Yes." Maevra stepped closer. "You chose to weaken your position," she said, "and it prevented escalation." "For now," Cashin replied. Dawn's first light crept over the horizon, pale and uncertain. Below, two armies remained standing. No blood pooled in the grass. No war cry had broken the sky. Kaler looked eastward where the rogue faction regrouped in shame. "My warriors saw restraint," he said slowly. "They saw us refuse advantage." Maevra's voice softened slightly. "They also saw you choose discipline over pride." Kaler glanced at her. For once, they did not disagree. Cashin stood between them as the first full light of morning touched the valley. 3 tests had been passed, but the true measure of success was not survival. It was what happened next. And that, the twins both knew, would determine whether the valley remained silent or burned by sunset. Dawn did not bring celebration. It brought scrutiny. Word of the failed ambush spread through the Orc ranks faster than the sun climbed the sky. Warriors who had stood ready for blood now stood restless instead. Some praised Kaler's restraint. Others questioned it openly. They fired first. One captain growled in the lower courtyard. "We should have ended it." They retreated. Another countered. "Why spill more?" Division hummed beneath discipline. By mid-morning, the war horns sounded again, not for battle, but for assembly. The clans would convene. Cashin stood once more within the circular chamber, though this time the fire at its center burned high and bright. Around the walls gathered clan chiefs, captains, and elders, dozens of them, armor heavy, expressions unreadable. Kaler stood at the head of the circle, Maevra at his side. Cashin stood alone before them. "This is not one of the tests," Kaler announced to the gathered clans. "The envoy has passed those." A ripple of reaction moved through the chamber, not approval, not rejection, just tension. "But he now stands before you," Maevra continued, "to answer what remains." A scarred chief stepped forward first. "You exposed your own ambush," she said to Cashin. "Why?" "Because it would have killed more than soldiers," he replied. "It would have proven what we expect of humans," another chief muttered. "Yes," Cashin said, "and I chose not to confirm that expectation." A low murmur passed through the circle. Kaler folded his arms. "Speak plainly," he ordered. "The clans will not sift through court language." Cashin nodded once. "Your warriors saw what happened in the ravine," he said. You saw that we did not command that strike. A chief snorted. You claim division. Yes. And what prevents another faction from trying again tomorrow? She demanded. Nothing. Cashin answered honestly. The bluntness stilled the chamber. Maevra watched him closely. So why trust your peace? A younger warlord pressed. Do not trust it, Cashin said. Test it. Silence fell. Kaler's brow furrowed slightly. How? He demanded. Establish joint oversight of the border, Cashin replied. Shared patrol routes. Transparent fortification limits. Written boundaries agreed upon openly, not assumed. The suggestion sent whispers around the circle. Joint patrols. One chief scoffed. Alongside humans? Yes. They will spy. You already do, Cashin replied evenly. A few low chuckles escaped from the edges of the chamber. The chief's expression hardened, but she did not argue further. Maevra stepped forward. If we agree to shared patrols, she said carefully, you accept our presence within sight of your fort walls. Yes. And you reduce expansion? Yes. Kaler's gaze sharpened. You cannot promise that. I can advocate it, Cashin replied. And I can tie it to what happened this morning. Kaler tilted his head slightly. Explain. Your restraint prevented escalation, Cashin said. If you had crushed the ambush fully, our hawks would demand retaliation. They already might, a chief muttered. Yes, Cashin acknowledged. But now they cannot claim slaughter. Maevra's eyes flickered thoughtfully. You seek to corner your own war faction, she observed. Yes. By forcing them to argue for escalation without evidence. Yes. Kaler's gaze swept across the assembled chiefs. He risks his standing, he said. He risks more than that, Maevra added. Cashin felt the weight of every stare. You stood in the circle, Kaler said slowly. You revealed weakness under oath. You exposed betrayal among your own. He stepped closer. Why? Cashin met his gaze. Because if this valley burns, he said quietly, both our peoples lose more than pride. Silence pressed heavily around them. An elder stepped forward, older than the rest, armor worn thin by time rather than battle. You speak of loss, she said. What have you lost? Cashin hesitated. My brother, he said at last. At the border. 2 winters ago. Murmurs softened. He believed war was inevitable. Cashin continued. I do not. The elder studied him carefully. Belief does not prevent steel. No, Cashin agreed. But choice might. Kaler turned slowly to face the gathered clans. The envoy proposes structured restraint, he said. Shared patrols. Fortification limits. And trust, one chief demanded. Maevra answered instead. Trust is not granted, she said. It is measured. She looked at Cashin. And he has chosen against his own advantage. The chamber quieted. The twins exchanged a glance, longer this time. Not conflict. Assessment. Kaler faced the clans again. You will have voice, he declared. But know this, we did not strike at dawn. That was choice. Maevra stepped forward beside him. And that choice prevented war. The chamber remained silent for several breaths. Then, slowly, one chief inclined her head. Another followed. Not unanimous. Not without resistance. But enough. Cashin exhaled slowly for the first time since dawn. He had passed the tests. He had survived the ravine. Now he stood before the clans not as opponent, but as possibility. The valley below remained quiet. For now. And in that quiet, something fragile began to form. Not peace yet, but willingness. And sometimes, that was enough to keep a sunrise from turning red. The valley did not stay quiet for long. Though the rogue ambush at the ravine had failed, humiliation breeds desperation faster than defeat. Captain Redhan had retreated before dawn under orders from loyalist commanders, but pride does not retreat so easily. By midday, word reached the citadel through a breathless Orc scout. Smoke. From the southern ridge. Not signal fire. Supply fire. Cashin's chest tightened before the scout even finished speaking. They burned their own forward stores, Maevra said sharply. Kaler's expression darkened. A feint. Or a spark, Cashin replied. If Redhan could not provoke war through ambush, he could force escalation through spectacle. They climbed the balcony overlooking the valley once more. From this height, a column of dark smoke twisted upward from the edge of the human encampment. Soldiers scrambled in disarray. Shouts carried faintly through the wind. That is no orderly withdrawal, Maevra said. Kaler's eyes narrowed. They want us to believe we attacked. Cashin felt cold understanding settle in his gut. If they claim you struck first, then our restraint becomes weakness, Kaler finished. And weakness invites aggression. Below, a group of human soldiers broke formation and began advancing toward the center of the valley, not in organized ranks, but in chaos. Redhan rode at their front. Even from a distance, Cashin recognized the man's posture. Reckless, determined. They will charge our forward line and claim retaliation, Maevra said quietly. Kaler's hands tightened against the stone railing. If we hold again, we appear defenseless. If you strike back fully, the valley ignites, Cashin replied. The choice had not ended with the third test. It had only shifted battlefield. Rethan's men advanced rapidly now, setting additional fires behind them. Smoke thickened, distorting visibility across the field. Cashin turned sharply. You must meet them in the open, he said. Kaylee looked at him. Explain. If they clash with hidden lines again, it looks like ambush, Cashin said quickly. But if you meet them visibly, shield to shield, and halt them without crossing the center. Maevra finished the thought. Then the valley sees who advances. Kaler hesitated only a breath. Then he barked orders. Orc warriors moved from concealment into clear formation along the northern half of the valley. Shields raised. Spears grounded. No charge. No roar. Just visible defense. Rethan's cavalry thundered forward through smoke. He expected hidden lines. He found open resistance. His momentum faltered too late. The first clash came hard. Human steel against Orc shield. Sparks flew. Cries rang out. But the Orc line did not advance. They absorbed. Held. Cashin watched as Redhan shouted furiously for his men to push harder. They're not breaking, one soldier yelled. Because they were not trying to. They were trying to hold. An arrow from the human side flew high and struck an Orc captain in the shoulder. Kaler's jaw clenched. Hold, he commanded again. Then something unexpected happened. From the southern ridge, horns sounded. Not Rethan's. The king's. Fresh human troops appeared along the ridge, disciplined, orderly, led by General Armand, loyal to the crown. They moved not toward the Orcs, but toward Retha. Armand's cavalry cut across the valley, intercepting the rogue faction mid-charge. Steel clashed, human against human. Rethan's formation broke. Confusion exploded. Cashin exhaled sharply. The king acted, he said. Maevra's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Your truth reached him faster than expected. Below, Rethan's attempted provocation collapsed under royal intervention. Within minutes, his forces were disarmed and surrounded. The valley fell into stunned stillness. Smoke drifted across the grass. Scattered bodies lay injured but not numerous. No massacre. No unstoppable escalation. Kaler lowered his hand slowly. We held, he said. Maevra nodded once. And they corrected their own. Cashin felt the weight of it fully then. If the twins had retaliated aggressively at the ravine, if they had crushed Redhan without restraint, the king's loyalists might have arrived too late. War would already be roaring. Instead, two armies now stood facing each other across a smoke-hazed field where the greatest clash had been human against human. Kaler turned to Cashin. You were right. It was not praise. It was acknowledgement. Maevra stepped forward beside them. The third test did not end with choice, she said quietly. It continued into action. Cashin nodded. And you chose again. The valley held its breath as General Armand rode toward the center under raised white banner. This time, not just Cashin crossed the field. This time, the signal of truce came from both sides. The betrayal at dawn had failed, and instead of igniting war, it had exposed those who sought it. Now the valley waited not for battle, but for decision, and for the first time in decades. The decision did not belong solely to anger. Smoke still drifted across the valley when General Armand reached the midpoint under white banner. Behind him, Captain Redhan knelt in restraints, fury burning brighter than the fires he had set. Human soldiers stood in uneasy lines, shaken not by defeat, but by realization. They had nearly become the spark that consumed everything. On the northern rise, Kaler and Maevra descended together. Not separately, together. Cashin walked slightly behind them, neither prisoner nor equal, but something in between. The valley watched. Two armies, hours from war, now stood suspended in fragile restraint. General Armand dismounted first. I come under authority of King Halvrin, he declared, voice carrying across the field. The attempted strike was unauthorized. Kaler's gaze remained hard. Your men attacked twice. And twice you did not retaliate beyond defense. Armand replied evenly. We acknowledge that. A murmur rippled through the orc ranks at that admission. Maevra stepped forward. Captain Redhan acted without sanction? Yes. Alone? She pressed. Armand's jaw tightened. Not alone in thought, he said carefully, but alone in action. Cashin felt the weight of that answer. There were always more who believed war inevitable, but belief did not equal command. Kaler's voice cut through the air. Why should we believe this is not layered deception? Armand did not flinch. Because if you intended war, we would not have stopped our own. Silence followed. Redhan spat blood into the dirt. We should have crushed them, he shouted hoarsely. They only held because they feared us. Armand turned sharply. You mistook discipline for fear. The words hung in the valley. Kaler stepped closer to Redhan. You would have given us justification, he said quietly. Redhan glared up at him. And you would have taken it. Kaler did not deny it. Maevra's eyes remained fixed on Armand. What punishment does your king decree? Redhan will stand trial in the capital, Armand said, for insubordination and endangerment of sovereign stability. Redhan struggled against his restraints. You bow to them now, he snarled at Armand. You kneel? No, Armand replied coldly. I prevent stupidity. Cashin exhaled slowly. The moment balanced on thin wire. If the twins demanded blood in repayment, the valley could still ignite. If Armand failed to satisfy their demand for justice, resentment would fester. Kaler looked to his sister. For once, he did not speak first. Maevra stepped forward. We require proof, she said calmly. Written acknowledgement that this strike was rogue and not crown decree. Armand nodded immediately. You shall have it. And limits on border fortification, Kaler added. Armand hesitated only slightly. That requires negotiation. Maevra's gaze sharpened. Then negotiation begins now. The armies shifted subtly behind them, not forward, not back. Waiting. Cashin stepped forward carefully. If I may, he said. Kaler glanced at him. You have spoken enough today. And yet you allowed it, Cashin replied. Maevra tilted her head slightly. Speak. Cashin faced both leaders. Both sides have now restrained their hawks, he said. The twins held their line. The king halted his own. Armand gave a faint nod. If this ends without formal structure, Cashin continued, we will repeat this within a year. Silence. Then structure it, Kaler said bluntly. Maevra's voice followed. Joint patrols. Fortification caps. Direct communication between commanders. Armand studied them carefully. You ask for integration, he said. We ask for visibility, Maevra corrected. Cashin felt something shift then, not tension dissolving, but recalibrating. Kaler turned to Redhan once more. You nearly burned a valley, he said. Redhan glared defiantly. It will burn someday. Kaler's eyes hardened. Not today. He turned away. That, more than any strike, felt like judgment. Maevra faced Armand again. We will withdraw our forward lines by 1 mile, she said. If you match it. Armand nodded slowly. I will recommend it. Recommend is not decree, Kaler warned. It will be decree, Armand replied firmly. Cashin watched the exchange carefully. This was no surrender, no triumph. It was recalibration through mutual demonstration of restraint. The twins had judged not only Cashin, but the moment, and they had chosen discipline again. The valley remained scarred by smoke, but no mass graves were dug, no war banners were raised. Instead, 2 leaders stood at its center with armies behind them, and chose to write consequence into policy rather than blood. As Redhan was dragged away under guard, Cashin felt the weight of the past days settle into something almost unfamiliar. Hope, fragile, conditional, but real. And as the twins turned back toward their citadel beside him, Kaler spoke quietly enough that only Cashin heard. You passed our tests. Maevra added just as softly. Now we will see if your kingdom can pass ours. The valley did not empty that day. It transformed. Where smoke had risen hours before, now stood tables dragged into the open center of the field. Not lavish, not ceremonial in the royal sense, but deliberate. Orc stone slabs were placed opposite human wooden benches. Between them, 3 iron braziers were set into the earth. Strength, truth, choice, the 3 fires of the tests. Kaler insisted they be lit in view of both armies. Maevra ensured the braziers were positioned exactly at the midpoint of the valley, neither side claiming symbolic advantage. General Armand stood with Cashin on the southern side. Orc captains stood behind the twins on the northern ridge. Soldiers from both armies watched in wary silence. Armor still worn, but weapons grounded. This was not celebration. It was conclusion. Armand unrolled a parchment bearing the king's seal. By decree of King Halvarin of Valoria, he read clearly. The attempted engagement led by Captain Redhan is declared unsanctioned and unlawful. Command authority remains committed to negotiated stability. A murmur passed through the human ranks. The words mattered. They severed the rogue action from royal intention. Kaler stepped forward next, voice carrying across the valley. The clans of Karveth acknowledged the king's decree and recognized the failed ambush as rogue. The orc ranks shifted slightly, some approving, some reluctant. Maevra stepped between them and approached the first brazier. She struck flint. The fire of strength ignited. This flame marks restraint and power, she declared. We stood ready to destroy and chose not to. Kaler stepped to the second brazier and lit it. The fire of truth rose higher. This flame marks honesty and danger, he said. The envoy exposed betrayal among his own. All eyes turned to Cashin. Armand gestured for him to step forward. Cashin moved slowly to the third brazier. The fire of choice. He held the torch a moment before lowering it. This flame marks decision over instinct, he said quietly. Both sides faced provocation and chose discipline. The three fires burned steadily between the armies. Wind brushed across the valley, but none flickered violently. Maevra addressed the gathered soldiers. Joint patrols will begin within the week. Kaler continued. Border fortification limits will be codified. Armand nodded. Direct lines of communication between our commanders will be established. Cashin watched the faces of both armies carefully. Some relief, some skepticism, some quiet anger that war had been denied. Peace is rarely embraced by all, but it is often protected by enough. Kaler turned to Cashin. You came under white banner. Yes. You passed our tests. Yes. Maevra stepped closer. But peace does not rest on one envoy. No, Cashin agreed. It rests on enforcement, Kaler added. Armand folded the parchment carefully. Then we enforce it, he said. The formal document of accord was signed upon the stone slab. Orc script and human script intertwined across the same page. No trumpets sounded. No cheers erupted. Instead, something subtler happened. Human soldiers lowered their helmets. Orc warriors grounded their spears. Not as surrender, as acknowledgement. Redhan would stand trial. Border patrols would shift. Fort expansions would pause. None of it erased distrust, but it redirected it. As the sun lowered behind the ridge, the three fires continued to burn. Cashin stood between Kaler and Maevra once more. You understand, Kaler said quietly. This peace survives only as long as discipline does. I know, Cashin replied. Maevra's gaze lingered on the valley. You have given us reason to attempt it. Cashin looked across the field where hours before blood might have flowed. It was not only me, he said. Kaler gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. No, he agreed. It was choice. The first fire crackled. Strength restrained. The second fire shimmered. Truth spoken. The third fire burned steady and calm. Choice upheld. As twilight settled fully, the armies began withdrawing in opposite directions. Not in retreat, not in fear, but in agreement. The valley did not burn. It held. And long after soldiers marched home and commanders returned to their halls, the story would spread of the day when the Orc Twins gave 3 tests. And both sides passed.